So welcome everyone, and thank you again for attending this session on creating change for water and climate justice in California and Central America. I'm Iris Stewart-Frey, a member of the conference organizing committee and a professor of environmental studies and sciences here at Santa Clara University. And this is my good colleague, Clare Pace. She is from UC Berkeley and a member of the Water Equity Science Shop. And it's been a wonderful experience putting together this amazing panel with her. Let's start with a few key logistics. We'll be keeping introductions somewhat close in order to maximize the time that the panelists have. And in this session, we'll have a keynote talk followed by 5 group presentations. And we're really excited about bringing together this amazing panel. And we want to acknowledge that the 12 minutes that each of the panelists have isn't nearly enough to do justice to all the amazing work that we'll be hearing from here today. So that we hope that the conversation that we're getting started here will continue in the breaks, in the meals, during the poster session, and then also into the future in continued collaborations. And in order to fairly allocate the time, we'll be, our student helper here, David, will be holding up a sign when it's like 2 more minutes and then time's up when time's up. And you know, we hate to interrupt people, but we just hope to get everyone into the panel. And with that, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Laurel Firestone. Laurel co-founded the Community Water Center, an environmental justice leader and community engaged policy advocacy group serving California's Central Valley and Central Coast. Laurel has been deeply involved in key advocacy work that helped to pass California's human right to water law, and currently serves on the California State Water Board, where she continues to advocate for equitable water access. Thank you very much for being here, Laurel.
Great, let's see. Y'all can hear me? Yes. All right. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really privileged to be on this panel of amazing people doing amazing work in California. So I'm really going to try and not take as much time as they had allotted for me, so we have plenty of time to hear about the real work going on here. I'm
so sorry. I think we don't have the right slides up.
There we go.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
And thank you. Thank you.
Okay, now we're all set. Sorry about that.
Perfect.
All right. So yeah, I think I have a opportunity to bring a little bit of the unique perspective because I've spent most of my career on the advocacy side, working with communities that don't have access to safe drinking water as part of Community Water Center we have here today. But now I'm on the other side of the dais and seeing things from that perspective in terms of the really effective advocacy that's going on, trying to influence the board that I'm on. And kind of looking at how I can be helpful in peeling back the curtain a bit. So I wanted to see if I can move this. There. Okay. Sorry.
One more thing that's getting in the way for you, which is this, right? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Great. All right, no problem. So I'm not sure that everyone's familiar with all the different visiting water agencies in the state and region and federal level. I am on one of the 2 main agencies at the state level that's in charge of water. Our role at the water board is really around water regulation and administering our water rights system, funding, and then the other major agency is Department of Water Resources, which in an overly simplified way is the state water project operators and kind of overall water engineering and planning arm. But I am on the state board. We, along with the 9 regional boards, have this shared really broad mission to preserve, enhance, and restore the quality of California's water resources, drinking water for the protection of the environment, public health, and all beneficial uses, and to ensure proper water resource allocation and efficient use for the benefit of present and future generations. And what that means is that we are responsible for everything from setting standards, overseeing compliance of safe drinking water standards, so that no matter where you live in California, you're all expected to meet the same water quality and have safe water in any community that you live in throughout the state. Regulating the sources of pollution, protecting public trust resources, and community health and human safety, access to water. And one of my favorite things, which is administering billions of dollars in grants and loans to invest in water and drinking water, clean water, funding projects, everything from drinking water, sewer, stormwater, and water recycling projects. So obviously, the agency has a huge purview, and really it's the way that we prioritize and the lens that we look through in focusing our resources and implementation that's really going to make the difference, I think, in achieving what really needs to be at the center of our work as we pursue that mission, which is racial equity. We did adopt a racial equity resolution at the state board. We have also adopted an action plan. Really, I think this is significant in that it's the first time that we have formally acknowledged and condemned our role as an agency in creating inequities, past, present, and current, in water quality and access, affordability, and really committing to eliminate the structures and practices that perpetuate this. And also linking that and acknowledging inequities in the workplace within our own agencies. And so in our efforts to move forward, we have been engaging internally with our staff, as well as with tribal representatives, community representatives, developing a vision and an action plan that will incorporate all aspects of our work, not just little pilot projects in certain areas, but really a very clear direction that all of our divisions, offices, and programs in every aspect of our work need to be centering a racial equity lens, in that we need to create metrics and public accountability to report out annually on how we're making progress, and that the racial equity lens is both meaningful outreach and engagement with Black, Indigenous, and communities of colors and tribes, but also an analysis, rigorous analysis in parallel and integrated with that. So just a little bit about me. I have seen often that proof is in the pudding, as they say. We're gonna be successful in achieving broad goals. We may say that we really care about racial equity, but we need to show results to prove that. And I was fortunate enough to be part of this relentless community advocacy movement that was able to pass the human right to water back in 2012, and have seen how important it is that we're not just working to first get the recognition of a problem, get the commitment to make it a priority, but that alone doesn't mean that you have safe drinking water on the ground, and that it really takes relentless advocacy within the implementation day-to-day, year-to-year across programs from source water protection to infrastructure, to each community project. So we can have all the funding and regulatory tools, but if a project isn't getting done on the ground, then people don't have safe drinking water. So I wanted to talk particularly about an area that is really recent, where I've seen really impressive success on, I think, just over the last 6 months in terms of some of the injustices going on that are not just around safe drinking water, but also access to clean water for other purposes. And so I think we'll hear and we have heard from folks on harmful algal blooms, access to water and rivers for recreation and public trust resources, and tribal access to fish that are central to culture. And you're going to hear from folks doing the real work here. But I wanted to share some of the advocacy that's been going on over the last 6 months that's kind of been out of the public view to most Californians, but there's has been led by members of various Pomo rancherias in Lake County to save a minnow that few of us, I would imagine, have ever heard of. I certainly hadn't before, which is the Clear Lake Hitch. This is a result of a member of environmental scientists from the Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians reached out in December to me, and that was really the first time I'd ever heard of the Clear Lake Hitch. I think this is one of the most important things was reaching the tribes, invited our staff, invited state and federal and local agencies to their own summit, called folks together saying we have an emergency, and we are inviting you all in to see the problem the way that that we see it, rather than from your little like silos of what you think your roles are. What I heard from our staff was this was at least maybe in part because of staff turnover, but this this fish was really not on our radar at all prior to tribes this summit that tribes pulled together. And then they came to us. So Sarah Ryan, who's the environmental director and the emergency manager for the Big Valley Pomo, has been working on addressing this for around a decade. But it was, I think, a major red flag that this was the first that our staff were starting to be aware of it. It was the first time, certainly, the board members that on our current board had heard of it. The tribal elders came to our board meeting and testified to help us understand about the Clear Lake Hitch specifically. The chai is, as they're referred to, is a large minnow pictured here, and it only exists in Clear Lake and a couple of nearby lakes. And so its natural range is really tiny. And in the past and currently, the chai plays a really vital part of Pomo culture as a source of food, trade, and tradition. And I think that was very clear by really effective testimony and that the tribal members that came did during just our public comment period. Helped us understand that the tributaries, the time period that it spends in the tributaries during spawning runs and after the eggs hatch is really short. It's 14 days. So that means that it's really vulnerable to changes in hydrology in those streams, but also that if we can protect the surface water loss for even those brief windows, we can stabilize the chai's numbers. So there's, I think, there was some reason to hope that we could do more. This was all, again, before starting in December of this year. when we didn't have the atmospheric rivers hadn't really started in earnest. And there was a real concern that we may lose the hitch altogether. They had originally numbered in the millions. And in 2022, the survey found 306. And there were even fewer the year before. So there was real concerns around that if a continuing dry year occurred and the alarm hadn't been sounded by tribes, that this could have been the year that the species went extinct. So what we have up on the screen are gillnet reports of returning Chi to Clear Lake. The bubble of adolescents that are seen in 2017 diminishes over time. So there's fewer and fewer adolescents are growing up to reproduce and help the Chi carry on. And so one of the things I wanted to note about this is that this was data that was generated in part from fish surveys that were only possible due to state and federal funding. And that came from the Chi being listed as threatened by the California Department of Fish and Game, which came from advocacy from tribes. So this is part of a decade-long effort to get species listed, to get agencies to fund and do data collection. And only now we are looking at the board to understand what our role is to do. I think one of the pieces, of course, within advocacy is the role of science. This is also something that was clear at the water board meeting that we held after tribal members came to testify. We had an information item where we asked tribal members to present, as well as local, state, and federal fish agencies and other agencies and agricultural representatives. Science is a key part of that. We had a lot of tribal scientists that were really the experts in showing us changes in life cycle and this sort of fuller picture. But I think also things like photos, things like traditional knowledge, experience, history is really powerful. This is a picture of a fish kill in 2014. And as you can see, these creeks are very intertwined with groundwater. Groundwater pumping is used in the winter for frost protection for agriculture in the area. And so, again, this is an area where there really hasn't been data and regulations and control. And so we've seen when there's big frost concerns and things aren't timed well, that this is the type of thing that can happen, especially in dry years. So at our information item, Ron Montes Sr. from the Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians is a tribal elder and historic preservation officer. He and their tribe's environmental scientists, as well as folks from Robinson Rancheria and state and federal agencies testified, I think, talked about what was needed in terms of data, in terms of the data that we had to push to show that interconnection between pumping and dewatering of streams, and ultimately led to a huge effort by not just our agency, but I think collectively across all the agencies that are there in a way that's really been unprecedented. And we have seen now that the Chi are running. So this was like a huge celebration. It's interesting how invested even I think our board members and staff are now, that because of this real engagement at board meetings with staff, we at the water board, things that we have been doing that in partnership with tribes to try to, that I think have been really successful, is we've done really extensive local meetings with growers, with boards of supervisors, talking about our concern as a regulatory agency on this issue, the types of actions that people can take to help the chai survive, looking at groundwater pump backs and removal of barriers, in addition to coordinating the timing of pumping for frost protection. Having a real threat of regulatory action is always, I think, critical for getting the kinds of collaboration that are needed to move to getting the data that we need. Folks are really protective of looking at groundwater data and sharing that, and we are requesting and that information in detail, and that's really, I think, is what's going to be critical for helping to make sure that we can also do enforcement and ultimately see some recovery of the chai. There's continued coordination across all of those agencies locally on the ground on a regular basis. And so they're able to troubleshoot where there might be regulatory barriers for things like pump backs or removal of barriers. But we're expecting that to need to continue. I do think that we have right now an opportunity for change as we see these really critical and alarming hydrological changes that are causing us to really rethink our systems around water in the state. That's also that time of change is an opportunity to change the structures that we work within and the systems that we have. We're also at this time of really cultural and institutional transformation within our state agencies, recognizing the harms and the continued systemic inequities that we have. So, and we have new laws and policies and dedicated staff ensuring that we're really doing meaningful tribal engagement, meaningful community engagement. But that I think won't result in the kind of change that we need unless there is strong community advocacy that are pushing us, coordinating and pushing for that joint pressure, both internally within the agency and externally from communities and tribes that are most impacted. And then finally, we are finally starting to begin to see more and more representation of tribal and Black, Indigenous communities of color within our staff and within our boards and appointed leadership positions. And I think that's part of getting adequate community power within water decision-making, both internally and externally. So just want to end with, I think we're only going to achieve the kind of California for all around water that we all, I think, want, with really hard, deliberate work at every level of government, and then most importantly, I think, by leadership at the local level to drive and guide and implement that promise. And that really depends on power building on the ground and advocacy and organizing and engagement and decision-making processes and on decision-making bodies that I think we're going to hear from more today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Laurel. I'm excited to introduce our next presentation, which considers the question of whether the CV Salts program addresses the needs of disadvantaged communities affected by nitrate contamination in the Central Valley. Our presenter is Marisol Aguilar, Deputy Director of California Rural Legal Assistance. Her collaborators include Iris Stewart-Frey, Professor of Environmental Studies and Sciences at Santa Clara University, Nicholas Jensen from California Rural Legal Assistance, and Thalia Galistam, also from California Rural Legal Assistance. And I'm happy to advance the slides if you would prefer that. Oh, oh. What would you prefer? A minute?
Good afternoon, everybody. Really happy to be here. Again, Marisol Aguilar, Deputy Director for the California Rural Legal Assistance. CRLA, as we are known, is a nonprofit legal aid. So we're a law firm. We provide legal services for free to people who are under low income. And so we have a set of offices, about 16 offices that are client facing. So we get to see from 40 to 50,000 people every year. And as we see so many people, we start to see some trends and some issues that arise that are common to some communities. When we see those, we create programs to address that specific issue. And so one of the programs that we created is a Community Equity Initiative. The Community Equity Initiative is sort of the environmental justice arm of CRLA. And we address issues of environmental justice in unincorporated communities throughout the state of California, but primarily in the Central Valley and in the Central Coast. And the advocacy tools that we use are multifaceted, very creative, because the issues that residents have are very difficult to address. And so we use a combination of community advocacy with leadership development, working directly with residents, policy advocacy to work with state and local agencies, policies, any programs, anything that's developed that could affect them, and legal advocacy, because we are a law firm, and so we try to play nice, but when that doesn't work, we'll go to court. So it's fun to have all three options available to us. And so what we're going to discuss today is part of our policy advocacy. So one of the issues that we continually see in our communities is a lack of clean, safe drinking water. And so this is especially prevalent in unincorporated communities. And in the Central Valley, there's a high concentration of nitrate contamination due to the high levels of agricultural production in the area. And so the CV Salts program is a water quality control program for the California Central Valley. It was developed by the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Board with input from stakeholders, other agencies. And the purpose is to reduce salt and nitrate contamination in groundwater. And so for us, our focus was on the nitrate part. So CV Salts, one of their components is the nitrate control program. And so with this program, they took the Central Valley, divided it up by priority areas based on the ambient nitrate conditions. So you see the ones in red are priority 1. They have to be addressed in a faster timeline than those in orange and of course the green. So this is how they divided up the Central Valley. The science on how they classify this is not necessarily provided, and that's one of the issues we'll talk about. So part of the nitrate control program, the way that the program is structured is that dischargers, or those who are discharging nitrates into the groundwater, are tasked with working collaboratively. They usually form a nonprofit, and with the help, ideally, of local community residents, of local stakeholders, they are to develop plans to ensure safe drinking water supply for impacted residents, to reduce nitrate loading so that the discharges don't threaten to degrade high quality water or contribute to exceedances, and a plan to implement long-term managed restoration of impaired water bodies. And so in order to address that first one, to ensure safe drinking water supply, these collaboratives, these nonprofits have to create an early action plan. And so the early action plan that we were focused on was in the Modesto-Turlock subbasin area. And so in this area, you'll see we had an estimate of about 2,053 wells that were exceeding the contamination level, the maximum contamination level for nitrate, and an estimated population of about 42,000 if you round up, outside the public water systems who were potentially impacted by high nitrate contamination. And so the way the program is supposed to work, the early action plan was that this collaborative was going to do a bunch of outreach, get to these communities, let them know that they could test their wells for free. Test their wells to see if they were safe, to see where they were as far as nitrate contamination, and if they exceeded the maximum contamination level for nitrates, they would provide free drinking water, a free drinking water solution, be it delivered bottled water, a point of use filtration system, or some sort of filtration system in the community where they could go and use it. So for this program, the main delivery method has been bottled water. So we were a bit concerned about the way that the program was going to be, that was being designed and how it would be implemented. And our main concerns were on, firstly, just determining what areas had high nitrate pollution, given that there's sparse data as far as where the wells are, what wells are contaminated. The second one is the outreach process. They're supposed to tell people that there's contaminated, but how are they going to do that? How are you actually going to reach all these people who are on wells and not on a public water system? They're far out there in the country most of the time. The third part was the application process. You have to be able to apply. If you have a great program, but nobody can apply for it, it's useless. And then the adequacy of water deliveries. Once you got through all of those three steps, and you were actually receiving clean bottled water, we wanted to make sure that it was adequate. And so to that first one, determination of high nitrate areas. We were concerned that the nonprofit was being too conservative and perhaps missing some impacted communities. For this, we had to partner with Professor Iris and her team of students to really understand the data and the science. We are attorneys and community workers, and the science is a foreign language to us. So really relying on them to look at the data and to look at the analysis and see if we could replicate what they were seeing to ensure that they weren't being too conservative and missing impacted communities. And so you see here, this is one of the maps that they created, including an outline. The purple areas are where the disadvantaged communities are, which is where we wanted to focus our attention. For the outreach process, we wanted to make sure that the agency was focusing on the specific needs of the community. We know that the communities that were mostly impacted were communities that were communities of color, that had lower literacy rates, higher rates of English, limited English speakers, with a lot of different issues with government agencies and trusting public officials. So making sure that the nonprofit understood the community they were going into. We as an organization, as CRLA, we're on the ground, so we are very familiar with the communities and wanted to make sure that we could share that information. Making sure that the information sessions they were holding were at appropriate times, were after work hours, were in the communities, were in locations that were easily accessible to residents who had lower car ownership rates, and that they were in the appropriate languages. A lot of the languages in the Central Valley are mostly Spanish-speaking community residents. Also, we wanted to advocate for increased in-person outreach. When this started, it was during COVID, and that was always a fear. But really, the best way to reach somebody is that in-person outreach. So we wanted to make sure that that was prioritized. And then working, of course, with the university to create informational handouts in the video to help residents understand that nitrate cycle and how nitrates got into their water. For the application process, again, the application process needs to consider the target population, right? Higher rates of poverty, which equals a lot less time to apply. So that application has to be easy to apply. Higher rates of residents will limit English proficiency, as I mentioned. Computer C rate, reliable broadband is an issue, and a high percentage of renters. So we advocated for an ability to apply via paper form, an ability to just call in and apply over the phone, multilingual staff and multilingual applications, and an ability for renters to apply without their landlord's consent. We weren't able to get that. We were still advocating for that change because renters are very, very shy about raising any issues with their landlords. They know that retaliation, though illegal on paper, is real and happens every single day. So for the advocacy of water deliveries, we're collaborating again with the university, and we obtained 2 joint grants to assess the adequacy of the program. So we wanted to gauge the community's knowledge of the program, how the application process was going for them, was the water that was being delivered sufficient, was it reliably delivered for them as well. So for our future work, we're going to be analyzing that survey data, sharing those findings with the agencies, advocating for the needed changes, and then in the future reviewing that long-term plan to reduce nitrate contamination in the Central Valley overall. So yeah, for more information, please visit the poster session at 5:30. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marisol. Our next presentation is on advancing Karuk tribal sovereignty and self-determination through water quality. Our presenter is Sybil Diver, the co-lead for the Stanford Environmental Justice Working Group at Stanford University. Sybil will also be presenting on behalf of her community partner, Ron Reed. Ron is a Karuk tribal member, dipnet fisherman, and cultural biologist for the Karuk tribe of California. We're sorry that Ron was pulled away at the last minute due to a family emergency, but grateful to have Sybil here today. Please join me in welcoming Sybil Diver.
Thank you, Iris and Claire, for inviting me and Ron and this incredible panel today. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. My name is Sybil Diver. I am a interdisciplinary environmental scientist. I teach at Stanford University in the Earth Systems program, and I also co-direct the Environmental Justice Working Group. And it's been a real honor for me in this work to learn from Ron Reed as my mentor. He's all the things that Iris said. He's also an incredible community scholar. He's a father to 6 children, and he really teaches me a great deal in this field of Indigenous water protection, but also just how to be a good mom, how to be a good collaborator, how to be a good advocate, co-advocating in allyship. So thank you, Ron, for many years of that. We have a presentation today on allied research for Klamath dam removal and holistic water protection. And I'm gonna take just a minute to set my timer so that I'm respectful of our incredible hosts here and co-presenters. I wanna share maybe more visuals than words if I'm able to really talk a little bit about the history of Klamath dam removal and water protection. Also share what that means in terms of Indigenous leadership and how we can, all of us who are doing advocacy work in partnerships or working on water protection, perhaps learn from Indigenous-led models of two-eyed seeing and really just share a tiny bit about some of the allied research that we're doing. And I'll highlight that this is a picture of Ron at the bottom at Ishikashi Falls, incredible and important and only place that's legally available to the tribe for subsistence fishing. And also the first time I ever visited the Klamath in 2008 with some of Ron's kids who were 8 years old that I now work with as colleagues. And just to share that perspective, my kid is now 8 years old. So it's pretty cool to have this long-term relationship and get to know each other's families as we grow and our lives change together. And Ron will be here online tomorrow. So this is sort of a sneak preview. And if you'd like to join us for more conversation, we'll get to also be with Save California Salmon, some of our collaborators tomorrow in the afternoon for the networking session. So please come. But briefly on the history, one of the things that is so great about this year is that we get to celebrate after 2 decades of advocacy and really tribal leadership establishing the political will for this dam removal beginning in the mid-Klamath region. And that started just last month. So this is an incredible effort getting to the dam removal for a series of dams that do not provide flood protection or agricultural waters and provide very little in terms of hydropower, but are unfortunately blocking fish passage because they were built without fish ladders and creating significant water quality problems in the basin. So that's a little bit about the dam removal, but to step back, I got involved in this work when I was in graduate school. Actually, before then, I spent about 2 decades working in partnership with indigenous communities around salmon issues. I was working in Russia initially. I got involved in that really through language because I was a Russian speaker. So got to learn about indigenous water protection in Russia and how the fish issues were deeply interconnected with indigenous land rights issues. And then learned that that was the same thing in my home. And I had never been exposed to that before. So when I got to graduate school at Berkeley, folks said, you know, there's some partnerships starting on this topic on indigenous protection of salmon right at this moment. And so I said, really, tell me more. I got on the phone with Ron. He told me a little bit about himself when we started talking. And I was very lucky to get involved in this work through the Karuk Berkeley Collaborative. And started learning also really with the history leading my my experience as a student, starting to develop a partnership with the tribe, not knowing a lot about this place or these peoples or this histories. And the history didn't go back just 20, 30 years. It went back to 1850 and time immemorial. So I started by studying the history with Ron and community members, and we made this 15-foot display, really linking some of the land management decisions to and policies to environmental and community health on the river, and really illustrated through some artwork that local youth contributed, tribal youth contributed, and also non-tribal youth in the community to really illustrate what is this place about, why is it important. The water justice issues on the dams are complex, but you can see some of the algae problems in the reservoir behind them. But that was one of the things that really came out of this study of history for me. And the tribal engagement of these issues has always been there with water protection. But this fish kill tragedy where 40 to 80,000 salmon died without spawning because of water quality conditions, poor water quality conditions from the upriver, creating an outbreak of parasites in the lower river. And this activated tribes to really start fighting hard on water quality issues in 2002. And I think what I want to highlight through this presentation is just some of the learnings that I've gotten from studying that history, and also from partnering from as a researcher, as a teacher, as a learner with tribal members on these water quality protection issues in research. So Ron, as I mentioned, is a community scholar, and we've been writing about this idea of two-eyed seeings. What does it mean to take from the best of indigenous knowledge systems and from the best of Western science systems to really facilitate restoration and repair, and doing that in a collective research partnership. So we've been thinking about this deeply, and the dam removal, I think, really illustrates some of the learning. When the Karuk tribe and many other tribes on the river that some of whom are represented here on the panel started really focusing on the water protection issues and on the dam removal, they did everything. There's really exciting work leveraging, in this case, social science to illustrate effects of altered diet on Karuk people and disproportionate effects of diet-related disease that are linked to the dams and the loss of traditional foods like salmon, leading to some settlement agreements on the dam removal. There's examples of the Karuk tribe in this case, leveraging biophysical science to monitor water quality, and they monitor 150 river miles today. Excuse me, in the mid-Klamath, which is a rural area. There's also really important knowledge from indigenous knowledge systems. We're gonna get some water. Excuse me. It's appropriate to call in the water on a talk that you're giving on water protection So we really need this. Thank you. And in terms of indigenous knowledge systems, my intent is not to separate indigenous knowledge and Western science, but one of the really exciting opportunities when we dig in here and we think seriously about indigenous knowledge in a holistic way is it's really encouraging me to think outside of silos. So when I'm in the world of water protection and research to advance that, my colleague Ron and all the leaders at the Karuk Tribe Department of Natural Resources teach me, you know what, if you're really concerned with the river corridor and protecting that water, you also need to be thinking upslope. You need to be thinking about the fire management of the forest and all the work around stopping catastrophic fire. You also need to think about, excuse me, health and wellness, another topic that's relevant for me personally. And the importance of bringing tribal foods back for the community that are connected to the river and all of the species that it supports that are connected to culture. It also means learning from ceremony, place-based management that is connected to ceremony, that infuses spiritual identities as well as our knowledge of science and technical processes. And all of these things are gifts that I get to learn from partnering on my work for years with Ron, his family, and many other tribal partners. And I think it's really inspired me to think about, okay, well, where does this go? How can we continue to take the best from what each of us know, and in the spirit of mutual exchange, which is so important in social movement work and in environmental justice, move this forward together in an allied approach. And I'll just share in the 1 or 2 minutes I have left a brief introduction to some research we're doing about the social impacts of Klamath Dam removal for tribal community well-being. And that's responding to a lot of policy approaches that have excluded Indigenous peoples from assessment processes. And we've done a long-term planning process with tribal partners, which included getting a grant that would pay tribal partners for their time in establishing the priorities for this study, and really use the well-being framework as the driving force behind what is important in a tribal assessment that you would do for and with tribal community members, with the goal of establishing at this time, before the dam removal process is starting, to think about a baseline for what community members are experiencing now and what they'd like to see with the dam removal processes. So this is our team. I see my time is up. Thank you. And I'm excited about our team also representing tribal community members, academics, youth, elders, biophysical science, social science, trying to bring those skills together to really learn together. So thank you, and y'all for your time, and I hope you can come in here, Ron, speak tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Sybil. Our next presentation will be given by Cintia Cortez, Policy Analyst with Restore the Delta, Hasil Willie, Staff Attorney for Save California Salmon and enrolled member of the Paiute Tribe, and Stephanie Safti, Clinical Supervising Attorney and Lecturer in Law at Stanford Environmental Law Clinic. Welcome.
Thank you. I think because there are 3 of us, we'll sit here, and we'll just ask you to please advance the slides for us. So just echoing others that have come before, just thank you so much to the organizers, this panel and this conference, for creating this amazing space and having us in it. So as you heard, I'm an attorney. My name is Stephanie Safti. I'm with the Stanford Environmental Law Clinic. And we have the honor of representing 5 diverse organizations. If you could just, Sarah, if you could advance the slide. Thank you. So we have the honor of representing 5 diverse organizations and tribal governments and a set of shared concerns with California water governance. You can see them here: the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians, Winnemem-Wintu Tribe, Little Manila Rising, Restore the Delta, and Save California Salmon, also with partners throughout the watershed. And you'll hear from 2 of these representatives of 2 of these organizations shortly. So just a moment, just reflecting on these themes of partnership. As a student clinic, we have a special responsibility to represent our clients as partners and allies really center and platform their stories and goals and objectives in this work. And we also have a responsibility simultaneously to train the next generation of attorneys to go out and lawyer in good partnership and allyship with communities. This work is really hard and it's challenging, and we're learning to improve on it every day. And we look forward to exploring different kinds of partnership models and thinking about how we can innovate and improve on the way that legal clinics can act in this space with you together over the next couple of days. So I'm just going to provide a bit of brief framing for our work and then pass it on to my partners. And we'll also be joining Sybil and Ron tomorrow for this workshop and invite you to come with us to continue that conversation. So if you could advance the slide, please. Thank you. So to set the stage, we believe that it's important to start by anchoring this conversation. Oh, thank you so much. By anchoring this conversation in a recognition of the way that racism and racial inequities are baked into the water rights system that California has. We'll speak more about this tomorrow, but just an acknowledgement that as the legal architecture for California's water rights system was being established, the state was waging a campaign of genocide directed at Californian tribes to divest them from their land and erase their inherent title and interests. The state water rights system that we have not only rests on that foundation, but its establishment itself furthered and perpetuated that violence and displacement. Tribes do, of course, maintain important water rights today and powerful ones, in particular federal water rights, which attach to land reserved for tribes. These have important priority over state rights. But for many California tribes, including ones that we work with, federal water rights are not available, or they're only a fraction of what tribes were entitled to under treaties that were signed in the 1850s by tribes, but not ratified by the Senate at the request of the California Senate delegation, and in fact hidden away under an injunction of secrecy for over 50 years. And I also want to acknowledge that these systemic inequities and exclusions were legislated into the water rights system for communities of color as well. It's just one marker of this. You can look to the 1913 Alien Land Law, which for several decades barred Asian immigrants and their children from holding property and land and thereby acquiring water rights. So these inequities, of course, are not frozen in the past. You can see the through line today, which we'll be talking about. One area that this manifests is in the picture of who holds water rights today and who manages water districts that hold water rights. Disproportionately, these are white people and they're males. So something else that we have looked at in our work together, an important focal point of our work has been staring down the way that these inequities manifest in landscapes and continue to impact the same communities that were excluded disproportionately from the water rights system from its inception. The Bay Delta, California Delta, is an important place where you can see this manifestation and embodiment. California's Bay Delta, as most of you likely know, is the largest estuary, freshwater estuary on the Pacific coast of the Americas. It drains more than half of the water that falls as rain or snow in California. It was once a thriving ecosystem stewarded by tribes for millennia. And today it's in a widely acknowledged state of crisis. We'll talk more about this tomorrow, but it's just some markers. Freshwater flows through the ecosystem have been reduced by half or more. There's salinity intrusion, changes to water temperature, increasing proliferation of toxic algal blooms, and loss of native fish species. Many of these issues are attributable to that vast export of delta waters driven by the water rights that I talked about a moment ago. So fortunately, as we like to remind the state and federal governments, we do have tools, or our governors have tools at their disposal to address these issues and start to promote restorative justice and repair for and with impacted communities. And one area that we're going to touch on, and I'm going to hand it over to my partners to speak about more, is the authority and duty to set and implement water quality standards under the Clean Water Act and the state's Porter Cologne Act. For the Bay Delta, that's implemented through something called the Bay Delta Plan. The law requires this to be updated every 3 years, or reviewed every 3 years and updated in accordance with the science. Unfortunately, the standards that we have are woefully out of date. The standards generally have not been updated since the mid-1990s. And the languishing of these standards is we've traced in some of our work and the large-scale exports that continue to color the picture of Delta waterways, as well as the continued exclusion of communities of colors and tribes from governance of water, have particularly profound effects on tribes and disadvantaged communities whose health, economies, culture, and identity are tied to the waterways. And that's a story that we've centered in a recent filing that we submitted with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. So I'm going to turn it over now to Cintia and Cecile, who are going to talk about their work with their communities and the way that this exclusive water governance system continues to manifest, as well as some proposals that we've been working on for repair.
Thank you, Stephanie. And again, I'm grateful to be able to share space with everyone on this panel. Hello, everyone. My name is Cintia Cortez. I am the Assistant Policy Analyst with Restore the Delta. Restore the Delta is a grassroots campaign of residents or organizations whose goal is to empower communities to become guardians of the estuary through the participation in government processes and to monitor our waterways. I primarily monitor and engage with the state water board processes and specifically regarding the Bay Delta Plan and the Delta Conveyance Project. And I also coordinate our Stanford Coalition that Stephanie spoke about that filed the Title VI complaint and the petition for rulemaking with the US EPA. I was born and raised in South Stockton, which is an environmental justice community and an AB 617 community impacted by poor air quality and poor water quality. Environmental justice is based on the principle that all communities have a right to be protected from environmental pollution and be able to live and enjoy clean water and air, regardless of race, color, and/or income. At Restore the Delta, we strongly believe that any proposed projects within or surrounding the Bay Delta watershed should not only be neutral in terms of impact to the water quality, but it should enhance estuary recovery as well. As we prepare to enter the summer, many of us may be planning to vacations or just summer activities. However, at Restore the Delta, we are preparing for yet another harmful algal bloom season. Harmful algal blooms, or HABs, as we like to call them, are cyanobacteria that can release harmful toxins into the water and potentially become aerosolized in a community that already suffers from very high asthma rates. They are a threat to public health and wildlife, and a perfect recipe for HABs is the accumulation of nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrogen and high temperature, as well as stagnant waters. And we are being told we only have 2 minutes left, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut this a little short. And so, like I mentioned, one of the things that contributes to harmful algal blooms is stagnant water, and that's something that we're able to control, unlike the high water temperatures. So let's see. However, lack of adequate flows due to unregulated water diversions are exacerbating environmental burdens in marginalized communities. Flows come from upstream snowmelt from the South Sierra snowpack. However, regardless of the excessive rain or high snowpack, the Delta is left without adequate flows due to low storage, due to water storage and diversions upstream. Water is stored upstream to prioritize the allocation of water to senior water rights holders in times of drought. Delta communities are left without flows, while senior water rights holders can sometimes still receive 100% of their water allocation. And this can happen in times of drought or in wet years, such as the one we're experiencing now. So communities are really at the mercy of the decisions made by the decision makers who have delayed the completion of the Bay Delta Plan and are proceeding with proposed voluntary agreements and permitting of the Delta Conveyance Project before addressing water quality concerns with an updated Bay Delta Plan. So So I'm just going to go ahead and cover a little bit of what we're doing at Restore the Delta. We are filling in the data gaps to better inform the public. We have also partnered with our Stanford Coalition in this petition, and we are also supporting legislation for better water quality and water rights reform. And just to end, to create change, we need to understand the past and the current systems under which water in California is managed was built on the foundation of racism, and that includes the current antiquated water rights system under which 89% of water rights holders are white males. Tribes and impacted communities bearing disproportionate burdens from the Bay Delta crisis should be at the center of water governance. And I will go ahead and pass it on to Cecile.
Yes, thank you very much, Casil, Cynthia, and Stephanie for presenting on this very complex collaboration. And we are really looking forward to hearing more about that tomorrow. So our next presentation is on supporting the human right to water to advance water justice in California's Central Valley and Central Coast. And this presentation will be led by Mikel Irigoyen and Mayra Hernandez, both from the Community Water Center. Please join me in welcoming them.
Can y'all hear me?
Stay seated, or do you want
We'll stay seated.
Okay,
We'll stay
perfect.
seated. Yeah. But can y'all hear me? Okay, yeah. So yeah, today Mikel and I are going to be talking a little bit more about how we support the human right to water, to advance water justice here in the state of California. In order to do that, we're going to provide a quick overview of our history. Then we'll talk a little bit more about the water challenges that we're seeing on the ground in the communities that we're working with. We'll provide a high-level overview of organizing strategies and an example of how we implement those strategies, and then we will conclude. So Community Water Center, we are a nonprofit whose mission is to act as a catalyst to obtain community-driven drinking water solutions, and we do that through organizing, education, and advocacy. We were founded over 16 years ago by co-founders Susana de Anda and Laurel Firestone that I have here right next to me. Our work really started in the Central Valley in Visalia, but then we expanded out to Sacramento. And about 4.5 years ago, we opened up our Central Coast office in Watsonville. So the example that I'm going to be sharing today is from one of those communities. So I'll pass it over to Mikel to talk a little bit more about the challenges.
Right. Thank you. I was going to steal the mic here. Hi, everyone. Many of you may be aware of this, but just as a reminder, there are an estimated 1 million Californians that are impacted by unsafe drinking water each year from the taps in their homes, schools, community centers, parks, etc. And this number doesn't even account for the over 90,000 domestic wells that have water quality at risk. And these domestic wells are typically found in unincorporated communities that are primarily communities of color, primarily communities that are low income.
And, now that that's been stated, it's a known fact. Some of the issues that arise are due to, unfortunately, California, there's a big production of agricultural commodities, right? And there is a over-exploitation or overuse of synthetic fertilizers that are used in, getting these commodities out into the communities. But here I want to direct our attention to the picture that you can see behind me. It's a beautiful view, right? It's a beautiful picture. You can see there's strawberries planted there, and just over the strawberries, you can see the ocean. But the important part here is the well. So this is a well that's found in North Monterey County, North Monterey County. And it's surrounded by fields. It's a well that supplies water to 2 households. And unfortunately, this well, has really high levels of nitrate, over 5 times over the maximum contaminant level. It also has 1,2,3-trichloropropane, and it also has chromium-6 levels above the maximum contaminant level. And so this is the reality that folks are living in this particular area of Northern Monterey County. And, all of these contaminants are primary contaminants that if you're exposed to them either through drinking, cooking, or through showering in the case of 123 TCP, it could have really bad health impacts. And also, other things that we're seeing is, that causes these challenges is also old depleted infrastructure. So this well was made in 1940s, and you can see it's a very old water tank that they have there, right? So there's a lot of issues that we're seeing on the ground. But thankfully, there's been initiatives, that we've been advocating for and that have been implemented to address these challenges. And one Laurel touched on, which is the human right to water, right? Access to safe and affordable drinking water is a right, and it's not a privilege. And that's really where our work is rooted, right? To make sure that our communities that live in these unincorporated areas that are primarily made up of low-income communities of color, have access to safe drinking water straight from their taps. And then other initiatives that I'll mention, is the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. I won't go too much into detail, but this is an initiative to make sure that we have, or that we plan to manage our groundwater sustainably. And then we also were able to pass the Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience, also known as SAFER Fund, back in 2019. And essentially what this did, it created, we now have funds, or I guess $1.4 billion to use over the next 10, 11 years to really invest in the infrastructure and provide consolidation projects and other interim solutions as needed. So with that in mind, how do we overcome these challenges? Well, our strategy really is to 1, organize, 2, educate, and 3, advocate. What do I mean by organize? I mean, we need to go out into the communities, meet people, talk to them, see what they know about their water. Most of the people that we've talked to, back 4 years ago, we would say, like, do you know where your water comes from? Yes, it comes from a well. Do you know if there's any water quality issues? They said, no. We don't know what they are, but, we know that we're not supposed to drink or cook with our water, but we don't know why. And so really that's why we make it part of our work is to really focus on providing accurate, understandable information and resources to folks so that they can really understand what their situation is, right? And once you have that understanding of, what's going on in your home and what's going on in your neighborhood and your community, then there's this natural, kind of aha moment. It's like, oh, this is bad. Let's do something about it, right? We're all concerned for our health, for our children's health, and the health of our community. And so that's how we foster community leadership. We bring people together, unite together under these unfortunate circumstances, of having contaminated drinking water. So I'm going to provide a quick example here. So this is the community that we refer to as the North of Moss Landing area. It's an unincorporated community. That's why it doesn't have a city name, right? And so this area, we tested about 29 wells, and all of the wells, as you can see here, the bottom graph is levels of nitrate. They are almost all above the maximum contaminant level. And then 123 TCP, they're all above the maximum contaminant level, right? And so we started organizing in this community back in December of 2018. We went to this specific community because we had some county data that showed that this was a potential hotspot for nitrate contamination. And then we were able to support the testing of 29 wells in the area thanks to the Central Coast Regional Water Board's free well testing program. And there we found that, the issue just wasn't nitrate. It was 123 TCP, chromium-6, total dissolved solids. There's really high levels of chloride also, which is an indicator of seawater intrusion. And so, once we had all this information, we came together with the community and we helped them form a community-based organization called El Comité para Tener Agua Sana, Limpia y Económica, or the Committee to Obtain Safe and Affordable Drinking Water. And so, we started organizing December 2018, created the committee in February of 2019. And then this committee, came together, started advocating right away to make sure that they work towards both interim and long-term solutions. So one of the interim solutions was that they successfully advocated for a free bottled water delivery service that was funded by the Cleanup and Abatement Act, and successfully connected 70 households to this free bottled water service, and it's still going till this day. And in terms of long-term solutions, we have been, or I guess we were able to, provide technical assistance to this community. And we conducted what is called an alternative analysis study, where essentially we looked at what all the long-term solution options were and how feasible they were, and came to the conclusion that the best solution for this specific community was a consolidation project with an existing water system called the Springfield Water System. And this is essentially, this started as a project where we didn't know anything, and then we came to learn that this consolidation project has been in the works for the past 20 years. And it had been halted because there was no funding. But thanks to the SAFER funding program, we've been able to move forward with this project. And we're actually looking to complete the first phase of this consolidation in late 2024. So really working towards, implementing those long-term solutions with our community partners and making sure that, all of the work that we do is driven by the community.
We just have a few minutes left, but I'll try to run through some of these interim solutions that we are doing on the Central Coast. On the screen here is our 123 TCP residential treatment pilot project. That is a mouthful, but the goal of this project is to reduce exposure to households from 123 TCP. We do this through these systems that you see on the screen. We have 9 of them currently installed across the Central Coast. And all these households rely on domestic wells for their water use. So instead of the water going from the well directly to the house, it first goes through this system. And they've all been effectively treating 123 TCP. This being a first of its kind project, we're learning a lot, and we're hoping to document these efforts to better inform statewide efforts, as well as kind of give an understanding to something that's not relatively known. It's been really powerful to kind of help community members be able to feel safe when they take showers, as TCP is dangerous when it's ingested, but also it's dangerous in the form of steam. So when you take a hot shower, it's dangerous as well. And then another program that we work with is the Regional Bottled Water Program. And this program kind of provides an immediate source of safe drinking water for low-income households. I'll rush through this real quick, but we, on the Central Coast, have facilitated over 200 well tests. With that, we're able to kind of provide that information to those households. If they have unsafe drinking water, we're able to enroll them in this bottled water delivery service where they get these 5-gallon jugs every 2 weeks for free. And I think one thing to reiterate with both of those is that they're interim solutions as we work towards long-term solutions in all these areas that we organize in. And just to conclude really quickly, it's really important to remember that when we organize, educate, and advocate within these communities, it provides both leadership and power to the community to be that voice and to kind of help implement those long-term solutions. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Mayra and Miguel. Our final presentation is titled Climate Forecasts for Community-Based Climate Change Adaptation in Smallholder Communities. We're joined by Raul Diaz, Director for the Asociación de Desarrollo Social de Nicaragua. He'll be presenting in Spanish, and we'll have the English translation on the slide. We're also joined by Allan Baez Morales, Director of Programs and Partnerships with Frugal Innovation Hub at Santa Clara University, and their collaborators, Iris Stewart-Frey and Ed Maurer from Santa Clara University. Welcome.
Buenas tardes, ya un poco cansado de tanto, estaba observando ahí las caras y sí hay bastante cansancio, pero hay mucho conocimiento por aquí. Así que juntos podemos hacer sinergia para enfrentar estos retos que son de orden global y por tanto los aportes de cada uno de nosotros pueden generar un granito de arena para esa solución global. Le vengo a hablar un poco sobre la experiencia que tenemos en Nicaragua. Perdón.
Good afternoon. It's a little overwhelming to see so many people watching the panel, but I think that it is very important to talk for all of us to talk about our organizations that can possibly make some change even with the beginning of a small grain of sand.
Compartir un poquito lo que hacemos en Nicaragua con la experiencia, en este caso con Santa Clara, la Universidad de Santa Clara y el Frugal Innovation Center. Ok, voy a repetir. La idea es compartir un poco nuestra experiencia de trabajo en Nicaragua en colaboración con la Universidad de Santa Clara y el Frugal Innovation Center.
I hope to share with everyone here the organization and the activism that we are engaging in Nicaragua with Santa Clara University through
El Centro de Innovación.
through the Center of Innovation.
La situación de los pequeños productores en Nicaragua no queda al margen, ¿verdad?, del impacto del cambio climático, y por tanto necesitamos generar capacidades para enfrentar estos desafíos.
The situation of the small farmers, we're here to talk about the situation of the small farmers and the challenges as well as the efforts we are making to create solutions.
La experiencia que queremos compartir un poco es precisamente en el territorio de Centroamérica, una franja bastante corta y delgada en las Américas.
And we'll be discussing an area in Central America that is relatively small, but very in need of help.
En esa franja pequeña también tenemos un problemita pequeño, y es que ahí atraviesa lo que se conoce como el corredor seco centroamericano.
The dry corridor has a long seasonal dry period and overall low rainfall in this area.
En ese corredor seco centroamericano viven aproximadamente 10 millones de personas.
In this area, there are approximately 10 million people living here.
Nos referimos además que en esa parte tenemos dos estaciones solamente en el año, que es la estación lluviosa y la estación seca.
There's a dry season that has been expanding in this over time.
Tenemos épocas secas de 6 meses durante el año y épocas que es inestable la lluvia también durante el año.
There are droughts that can last up to 6 months and then times when there's too much rain.
Así es que contamos con lluvias muy pequeñas, pero también con huracanes. Son los dos extremos.
There is the extreme of little rain that is not enough and major hurricanes that are not good.
Con esto tampoco quiero presentar que es un territorio caótico, no. Es un territorio también de muchas oportunidades.
In this territory, there is very chaotic weather, but it also has the potential for many changes.
De tal manera que un territorio con dificultades también puede ser un espacio para generar iniciativas muy innovadoras.
This land has the potential to create innovations that are essential to the environment.
Y por eso ahí es donde surge el encuentro con el Frugal Innovation Center, la Universidad de Santa Clara y ASDENIC.
And we are here to work with the Frugal Innovation Center at Santa Clara University.
Desde este espacio donde también participa directamente la comunidad, es lo que nos permite generar iniciativas que van directamente a generar soluciones para los problemas del cambio climático.
With the direct unity of the community, there is the potential to create initiatives that will create a change for the environment.
Cuando hablamos de iniciativa innovadora, nos referimos, por ejemplo, a incorporar tecnologías en las actividades para el tema de gestión del agua y también gestión de la producción.
Innovative initiatives might include including technologies that will help with water technology and the betterment of the rest of the environment.
En este territorio no podemos trabajar con actividades puntuales o terminales, sino más bien desarrollamos un proceso participativo bien planificado y de largo plazo.
We cannot create activities that are short in range. We must create ones that are long-standing and that contribute to continual change.
Y ese proceso genera compromisos de orden territorial, pero también muy participativo.
We would like to create strong commitment within organizations with a lot of participation.
Creando soluciones relevantes que son parte de una agenda creíble y sustantiva.
To create relevant solutions that are part of a relevant agenda with tangible goals.
Tenemos en Nicaragua un enfoque integral poniendo en primer lugar a la comunidad, en el centro el ser humano, para un enfoque de fortalecer la capacidad para el monitoreo del clima.
We want to centralize people at the center of this cause in order to understand how people are related to the change in the climate and environment.
Monitorear el agua.
To monitor the land and the water.
Proyectar pronósticos a corto y mediano plazo sobre el clima.
Project goals that are short-term and long-term goals.
Utilizando tecnologías apropiadas.
Utilizing appropriate technologies.
Para fortalecer a los productores del norte de Nicaragua.
To contribute to this northern area of Nicaragua.
Lo que buscamos también es generar resiliencia.
We also seek to generate resilience.
Y trabajando con herramientas.
And working with tools.
Como encuestas.
Like surveys.
Grupos focales.
Focus groups.
Pero sobre todo también trabajando con los estados emocionales de las personas.
But most importantly, focusing on the emotional well-being of people.
Para que puedan enfrentarse a los desafíos.
So that they might be able to confront these issues.
Buscamos que la ciencia sea de beneficio para la comunidad.
We seek that the science may be beneficial to the communities.
Popularizar la ciencia es acercarla directamente a la gente para que la entienda.
And make it accessible so that people might understand it.
No queremos que la ciencia esté en un nivel y la realidad en otro nivel.
We do not want the understanding of science to be on one level and the reality on
Sino
another,
colaborar juntos.
without collaborating them together.
Y aquí nuestro trabajo en ASDENIC, Nicaragua,
And our work in Nicaragua
es servir como mediadores
is to serve as mediators
para que estudiantes de la Universidad de California y maestros,
so that students at the university and teachers,
junto con miembros de la comunidad
together with members of the community
en Nicaragua
in Nicaragua
y técnicos de las instituciones,
and technicians of institutions,
puedan trabajar como un solo equipo
might work as a singular group
para generar soluciones pertinentes.
to generate long-lasting solutions.
Este es el rol nuestro y en ese sentido es que se genera pues el encuentro y esa sinergia con la Universidad de Santa Clara.
And this is our role and our need to collaborate with Santa Clara.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. And Alan, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Do you just want to give a 30 seconds? Let's see. We don't have the additional slides on it. Do you want to give a 30-second addition?
Yes. Well, I'm gonna change some gears and say hi, everyone. I am in the right now in Guadalajara, Mexico. I am the director of programs and partnerships for the Frugal Innovation Hub. The only thing that I want to add, this is my TikTok version of my presentation, is about justice and accessibility of technology. I would like you guys to consider something. How can we provide accessibility to farmers worldwide utilizing technology? Think about equity. Think about respect for the local knowledge. Think about how to integrate people in the building process, in the construction, how to respect their understanding of their reality. So that's a very key part of developing this kind of project. But the other thing that I want you guys to keep in mind, and that's what we do as part of the Frugal Innovation Hub, is technologies. How can you utilize, as scientists, technology to bring all this information to people? It's not only the technology per se, but it's how to present it to people, as Raul mentioned, appropriate technologies. And that's part of what we do at the Frugal Innovation Hub, not only the technology part, but how to design technology that is appropriate to the local knowledge, to the culture, to the religion, to their beliefs, to their socioeconomic level. So I just would like to invite you to do two little things. Invite you to our website and to, as scientists, to work with us and find how we can work in technology and science for community. And the second thing that I would like to invite you is to take a look at our posters, in which you're going to be able to learn more about our project from three perspectives. One, the social and environmental part of our project. Two, the forecast science behind it. And three, the technology that was developed behind this project. So thank you, everyone. And I hope you guys have a great afternoon there in Santa Clara.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Robert. We only have a couple minutes left, and I just wanted to circle back really quickly. I know we will have more time tomorrow in the breaks to talk about that, but Castle, could you circle back to this idea of the role of the tribes in restoration and restoring the water system? Do we have the clicker? Where do and oh.
Okay, so while the slides are being brought up, just to introduce Safe California Salmon, we're mostly tribally run nonprofit. Our work is twofold. We work partly in education and integrating indigenous knowledge into schools, and also in law and policy, which is where I work as a staff attorney, working on advocating for flows into rivers and improving water quality standards for tribes and protection of tribal cultural resources. And so I'm going to talk briefly about tribal beneficial uses. In 2017, the State Water Board adopted these three tribal beneficial use designations to be implemented by the regional water boards in their basin plans, which is a really great step forward in theory, but there are a few things that are holding the tribal beneficial use designations back from being fully effective. Specifically, I wanted to talk about the Bay Delta Plan, which implements its own set of beneficial uses through the State Water Board and not through the regional board. So it is something that is I think the State Water Board is dealing with it right now and sort of implementing tribal beneficial uses into that plan. But currently it's not being covered under either Region 2 or Region 5 of the regional water boards. And also for these designations for the regional water boards, there's no set timeline. The basin plans are
supposed to be updated every 3 years or so, and it's been 6 years since the designations were made, and none of the regions have made it past step 2 of 5. So that's something that could be rectified in helping get these tribal beneficial uses implemented and help tribes protect their cultural resources. Also, it's sort of a long-term process, which makes it very difficult for tribes to engage long-term. Tribal councils turn over a lot of time, staff leaves. So it's a difficult process to remain involved in. And then I do want to acknowledge the effort that the State Water Board and the regional water boards are doing on this issue, but there's just a little more work that needs to be done to correct past harms. And sort of why I wanted to bring this up is because it's a threat to cultural resources, which relates to the water rights system, right? So like Stephanie said earlier, you know, the water rights system is inherently racist and based on these rules and regulations that were developed when tribes were not being treated fairly. And so their land and water was taken from them. And so we lost our rights to our cultural resources. So implementing these tribal beneficial use designations is necessary to protect the cultural resources in all watersheds, ideally. So low flows, poor water quality means that tribes are at further risk of losing cultural resources that have already been lost through state-sponsored cultural genocide and continuing harms. Examples of these resources are listed over there. Some of the images, there's someone collecting tule, a tule boat, and then at the bottom there are some grindstones on the American River. And so by working with the state and regional water boards, there's definitely opportunities for tribes to engage and express their concerns. And it's a way for California tribes to reclaim some of the resources that have been taken from us. And help restore the culture and traditions that have been deeply connected to the rivers and aquatic systems since time immemorial. And really, it just gets us a little closer to water justice for tribal communities and sort of that restorative justice.
Thank you very much. I think those were amazing bookends. You know, when I think of the keynote and then this ending of the tribal perspectives and all these amazing recommendations, and you know, reminder for us to think about the conversations and the actions that actually would need to follow. I know we're out of time. I would like to thank this amazing panel for